Welcome, everyone. The board met in executive session room 206 for the purpose of discussing the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person. We've already said our pledges, and as you can see, 4 of us are here, and Trustee Clemenson is going to be coming about 15 minutes late. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Well, I hope everyone had a relaxing and rejuvenating week. I think the last thing I did here at the school before I left was see the Seussical musical. I think that was the last thing I did on campus, which was great fun. And it was great to see them on the cover of the Highlands Current today. Some 4th graders there that my son feels he's extraordinarily lucky to be friends with, so that's great. The next meeting of the Haldane Board of Education will be held on Tuesday, April 18th, 7 p.m. in the Auditorium. The workshop topic for the meeting will be high school and athletics detail reports, and the budget topic will be the adoption of the 2023-2024 Haldane budget. Additionally, I want to inform everyone that candidate petitions for the Board of Education trustee position are now available in the district office or by contacting Megan Shields, our district clerk. Those petitions and the first campaign expenditure statement are due no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, April 17th in the district office. So if you'd like to put your hand up, that date is coming very quickly. That's all I have. Dr. Benante.
Thank you, Sean. Just a few comments. Again, welcome back to school. It was great to see our students and our staff back on campus today. It was a beautiful day on campus. I hope that everyone enjoyed their time with their families over the course of the past week, many of whom were celebrating the holidays, whether that be Easter, Passover, or Ramadan. It's a time where people of these faiths honor a sense of renewal, hope, and as we enter the spring and the warmer weather hopefully stays, it's a time of celebration for us as well as we begin the last quarter of the school year. Just a few updates on matters that we may have discussed in past meetings or just some things that have come up that I wanted to mention. A group of elementary teachers and I are meeting towards the end of next week to discuss the class size or section matter that's come up for us. And thank you to those teachers who have volunteered to be a part of that discussion. So I'll meet with those teachers and then perhaps have more information to share with the board afterwards. We're meeting quite frequently, the board, that is, and I over the next few weeks, so we should be able to keep you in the loop on that discussion and other matters of district business. Our spring sports teams are off to a smooth start. I wanted to again acknowledge the board for its support of replacing the infield at Mayor's Park. Our team had their first home game today. I was just down at the field. The field looks great, and many comments from families. I wasn't talking to the players because they were playing, but who were excited about the field conditions and the efforts that went into that. And again, thanks to the village leadership as well for working through that with us. It just looks dramatically better than it has in years past. Our principals, I know, will have a lot to share at our next meeting and pertaining to the events that have happened in schools. But I also wanted to express my appreciation and acknowledge the hard work and effort that our elementary students put in to Seussical the musical. Special thanks as well to Mr. Sauer, who was our director, and I know Damien was involved in the background as well in the production, as he always is. It was really just an outstanding production, and as Sean had mentioned, there's some photos in this week's Current that are there for the community to see, and just a great job by our kids. Finally, as we continue with budget development, we're also, I mentioned to the board, our efforts around planning for special education somewhat happen concurrently with budget development. I don't want to conflate the two, but there are a lot of dynamics at play because some of the costs associated with special education can be expensive for out-of-district placements. That being said, one of our goals as we went into budget development, and Dr. Cation has shared this, is to consider how many students we could potentially provide greater opportunity to attend either school at their home school, where they maybe in the past could not, or in close proximity to. So Regina has been working very closely with Miss Allison Emig, who's the principal over at Garrison, and they have begun to put the structures in place to put a shared program for students with learning differences in grades 2 through 4 together for another special class. So we've talked about the special class that we have, and we've budgeted or recommending the budget for here at Haldane. Garrison and Haldane are working together to create another special class at Garrison. So it would technically be Garrison's class. It would be a Garrison teacher. That being said, it would allow what we know of right now. We project 2 Haldane students that are currently in out-of-district placements to come closer to home. I believe Garrison's at least initially planning to have 2 of their students also as part of that classroom next school year. It would be a language-based program, multi-sensory, multimodal class with integration into the general education setting in the Garrison school. So that's a great development. Regina, I know, will speak to it a little bit more as part of her board report next week, I believe. And I just wanted to let the board know that we continue to work together in that way to try to increase opportunities for our students to attend school, if not here at Haldane, in very close proximity to, as opposed to programs that may be upwards of 40 or 50 minutes away. So that's positive news, and our thanks to Garrison for being good partners with that. Pause there in case there's any questions.
No. I did for a moment, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Just, do you project that there will be reciprocality on the special class that we were creating, that there will be any Garrison students who would be eligible or interested in attending that, or do we not know yet?
We don't know yet. I don't want to misspeak, but I'm almost certain there's no Garrison students who project to be a part of our class. But we do, both programs will have space.
Yeah.
So our class is designed as a 1-8-2. So 1 classroom teacher, 8 students, 2 aides.
Yep. Okay.
The Garrison class, similar structure. And right now we only have 4 students in each class. So there is that opportunity to open up additional seats,
Right.
Whether it be to Garrison students who may be eligible, meet the profile of the class, or students from other schools who do. But right now there are not any scheduled to be.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Well, and that's just what we know for the first couple of years, right? This is not a short-term
Correct.
change. We're planning for the long term,
Right.
and so it's certainly possible that I could have in the back. I think that's great news.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Moving on to our special presentation, I believe.
Yeah, so I have just a brief budget overview at this point, really to hear if there's any further feedback from the board. I'll actually come up to the podium there to get us going. Just one other piece of paper here I'm looking for. Thank you. Before I jump in, I did want to mention that you may have noted a report that was released by the Comptroller's Office warning of an impending fiscal cliff. It's in the NYSBA newsletter, and was something that grabbed a headline or two, probably over spring break, which hopefully folks were tuned out a little bit. But I wanted to share with the board the dynamics that are influencing that warning, because we don't just want to have a short-term view of budget going into next year. We want to really be looking out further than that. So the Comptroller's Office is projecting increases to state aid, which is good for us, but significant decreases in federal aid. So the warning, if you will, that has come out from the Comptroller's Office is really drawing attention to the fact that schools had received an influx of federal aid through the COVID pandemic, and now that aid is expiring. So while state aid is projected to increase, it's not at the same rate as federal aid is projected to decrease. Federal aid is going to decrease at a higher rate, if you will, than state aid is projected to increase. So that's where the cliff could come into play. I will say my initial review of this is that we should be okay. That we didn't receive a significant amount of federal funds to begin with, as you're aware of, and those that we did, in particular going into next school year, are now being accounted for in the local share of the 23-24 budget. So Haldane specifically isn't going to be as dependent on any federal aid going into, any relief aid that is, going into next school year, and then certainly the years thereafter. We will have expended all of those monies, and we were, I think, prudent in this year's budget development to make sure we spent the money that we had available to us, and we're accounting for the position, in one position in particular that we were seeking to maintain through the local share, and the increase in foundation aid this year allowed for us to do so, among other things. So that's, I think, good news for us. Now, these are all projections, and we can see what happens in the future. But I think as it relates to that specific report, there isn't too much for us to be concerned about. While the state budget has not yet been adopted, the governor and the legislature appear to be in agreement on many of the elements that are related to school funding and public education. I included under my remarks, just for your reference, the NYSBA final state budget priorities in my comment section of the online version of board docs. It's in public view, just so you can see those. But you can see where NYSBA is. First, you can see where the executive and legislature are in agreement on particular items that we may have discussed over the past few months, and NYSBA's position of support or opposition to those spaces of agreement. So generally, things continue to be shaping up well as it relates to the state budget. We just need it to be voted upon and approved as we get into the next few weeks. So with that, I'll now jump into the presentation. I want to mention, I didn't include specific positions here, that our budget for the upcoming school year increases funding for special education through the creation of the special class, as well as a high school special education position, increases funding for foreign language, which also expands the program into the intermediate areas, increases funding for robotics, grades 4 and 5, brings on now the interventionist position that we were funding through COVID relief funds into the general fund. So we'll now secure that position as part of our staff in the future, and also has increases to the professional learning budget for our staff. So all good things. As I mentioned early on, we, given the nature of our budget being relatively small each year, we just try to make gradual improvements to our program, increases to our staffing, typically focusing on one program area as opposed to trying to spread out all of those monies across many program areas. And I would say the most significant program area that's influenced next year is going to be in the area of special education. This slide provides an overview of our revenues. You're quite familiar with these. The most significant increase being the full restoration of foundation aid, which hits us on the state aid line there. There are other aids that are included in that, but that's where you'll see the most significant increase to revenue. Other revenue is primarily driven by our tuition, the students who tuition in from Garrison or from other schools. And we are trying to begin to offset the use of our reserves in budget development here as well. So it's a tax levy increase of 1.96%, a budget to budget increase of 3.8%. Megan. We're going to provide the three component overview. These charts are you should be quite familiar with by now. There are not any significant, as we look at budget 22-23 to budget 23-24, really not significant changes from one budget year into the next here. I'll just give you a moment to review it, see if you have any questions, and then we can move on. This is, I know, for our board, information that you've already seen, so I won't repeat myself. But I'm happy to highlight any area or speak to any area that you'd like me to. Something I pay attention to as we just look at our spending over the years is the percentage of our total budget that each component is comprised or comprises. So looking at 22-23 to 23-24, The admin component is still the same, very close to being the exact same percentage as it was this school year. Megan? We looked at capital, which includes operations and maintenance, employee benefits for those groups, our debt service and our interfund transfers here. Again, if you look at this as a component of our spending, it's 13.6% this year, projected to be around 13.3% next year. Something we'll want to pay attention to in the future is that debt service schedule. As we consider potentially doing capital work on campus, as we have debt expiring, you'll see just a few years ago our debt service was close to 1.7 million. Now it's down to about 1.3. This is a strategy that we can employ by taking on additional debt consistent with the level of debt that we're paying off. Those become tax neutral propositions. So as we begin to plan for our next bond proposition or any sort of capital work we're doing, we're going to pay close attention to what that debt service schedule is, not only right now, but into the future, to see how could we bring on debt to help offset the tax impact that our community may experience with whatever building project or projects we were to take on.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit off tangent if that's okay. So when we did the infrastructure bond, it was $2 million or whatever it was at the very beginning. We took on all that debt.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's a question. I should ask that as a question. Did we take on all that debt? Because if I remember correctly, there were components of the work that actually didn't get done.
Correct.
And at this point, it is a wrap into a larger conversation. So did we take on 2 million, or did we take on only what was needed we had the rights to take on 2 million and we only took on what was needed to do the work that we did?
That's
Got
it.
Okay, fine.
So we have not spent all that. We have not taken on, it was a $2.3 million project, if I remember correctly. And we have not taken on $2.3 million worth of debt. We've taken on the debt for the components of the project we completed. And just to get a little further into that, so we projected that work, the scope of that work, to cost X amount of dollars, let's just say 2.3. As we went and bid out certain parts of that project, cost of construction has gone up significantly. So there are certain components that we just chose not to do because it was now beyond what we had indicated to the community it would cost. So we have not brought those forward. As we look ahead to any future project, we have to consider, well, are we going to go back to some of those projects
Or
now and
things.
include them? And one of them in particular just may not be viable, just given what we've learned. In particular, that project included a renovation of some space in the district office, which I think we've just learned through additional conversations with our architects and also with CSR, so two different architecture groups, that the cost to renovate that space is just going to may very well just make it cost prohibitive, considering what it would be used for, because it's not instructional.
Yeah. At some point, that might not be worthy of a whole workshop, but just to put a cap on that. Okay, we did this 2 years. This is what we outlined we're going to do. These are the 4 things we did. We didn't do this. We're pushing it to and that.
Absolutely.
Even a
Yep.
report, even just a little.
Yep. I think a significant portion of what remains is scheduled to be completed this summer.
Okay. Perfect.
So
Great.
next fall, that would line up really well to say, we're going to close this out now. Here's the total cost, and here's what remains that we didn't do.
Yeah.
And again, the parts we didn't do, I don't think there's going to be too many strong feelings about, because it's the parts that don't impact kids directly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So as we work with our financial advisors, not to get into a whole nother presentation, because we'll have one about the campus master plan, they'll provide a perspective on the debt service and how, again, that can be should be factored into consideration of any future work that we do. And the program component comprises the most significant portion of our budget, and this is the piece that probably is most directly related to our kids, in that this it represents instructional salaries, other program areas. that all operate in support of our kids' experience here on campus. So again, looking from 22-23 to 23-24, we're right around 74% of our budget is comprised of this here. Not too many significant shifts here. I will say special services is where you'll see one, and I spoke to that. That includes special education, and this is the one part of the budget going into next year where we're funding new positions, a new classroom, so that's where you see the increase there. There's other areas of special education that increase that were included in Regina's report, which include the cost for out-of-district placements is also going up. So you may think, well, one teacher, two teachers, a couple of aides, that's about $400,000. That's not quite $400,000. That is, there's also increases the costs for out-of-district programs as well that would reflect the balance of that.
It's the smallest line, but special schools proctoring in summer has gone down by $12,000 because that used to be a summer school that we
Correct.
no longer have. Right?
Correct. We still reserve funding for it in the case we have students who need some support in the summertime, but generally these are funds that are not even utilized to that amount. I think you can see what we're projected here for 22-23 being about $1,000, and that's really reflective of work that occurred last summer. Okay, Megan. Thank you. So again, the three component summary here in condensed version. The budget levy comparison I have next, Megan, I think. Yep. So just over the years, this gives you a reflection of what our budget to budget increases were against our levy to levy increases. We have gone to the levy limit in each of the last 5 school years. Sorry, I should say 6 school years. I believe in 18-19 we went to the levy limit as well.
For those following along at home, and for those of us on the board who can never remember how this is calculated, can you provide a top line on how the levy limit is calculated? The only reason I was thinking that is because of like, wow, inflation's gone up a lot. I would think that would increase the amount that a school can raise through taxes because they need to take care of regular things that have gone up in price. But that's not the whole story, certainly. It's based on property taxes and assessable value, and there was probably a decrease from 22-23 to 23-24 in tax. Just like
So
and you can punt because I know it's a complicated
formula. I'm going to partially punt,
okay,
if there's such a thing. It is somewhat tied to inflation. However, it's capped at 2% or CPI, whichever is lower. Right. Okay. So that's so we're capped there and have been for a couple of years. So that particular variable in the tax levy calculation. So there is I'll say a loose connection to inflation, right, but it's set to a ceiling of being no more than 2%. So even if even if inflation is at 7%, well,
that contributing factors too.
It's set at 2.
Okay.
But you also mentioned assessed valuations, which is my understanding of one of the variable that most significantly influenced our levy limit for next school year, in that assessed valuations of homes in the area remained either flat or slightly decreased. And I'll just turn to Catherine to make sure I have that. Yeah. Right. So when the housing market's doing really well, I shouldn't tie it to the housing market, when valuations are increasing, that's, I would say, good for our levy limit. But right now, valuations remain relatively stable.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There are probably 12 other variables that I can't speak to, and I'm punting on those.
That's fine. That's totally fine.
It's pure alchemy.
It's totally alchemy.
Right. Good. Budget will also include a vehicle purchase proposition. We have identified that we are in need of a 30-passenger school bus at a cost of $78,000, some maintenance vehicles as well, just to replace vehicles that we currently are nearing the end of their useful life on campus. We do finance this through a ban. These are tax-neutral propositions. I did speak to Mr. Twardy. A community member had posed the question a couple of weeks ago about whether or not we need to replace a vehicle every year, whether we should consider how we do this, considering we're going to have to transition to electric vehicles in the future. We likely do not need to purchase a vehicle each year. However, whether it be Mr. Twardy or a new director of facilities, would like a little bit more time. This one is necessary, but we can and should re-examine our schedule now moving forward. So very astute community member, considering what's on the horizon here. We may not, or next year we should have better information to present to the board with respect to a replacement schedule and what that should look like, which may not look like it always has for us. This is pretty typical for us to put a proposition of this nature and around these values before the community for vote, but we very well may not be doing that or taking a different strategy in subsequent years given the transition we expect to make to electric vehicles.
And when all new vehicles need to be EV by 25?
2027,
Purchases
any
of
new
27.
purchase,
And then entire fleet by
2035.
35. Okay, 27, 35. All right, so not that.
Check road salt is still road salt, whether it's on an EV or a diesel bus.
Correct.
Yes.
That's really what happens to the buses.
This will also give us some time to examine the infrastructure needs on the electric vehicle, which are included in the master planning process, which, again, we should have some those representations to you by the end of this school year.
It's all just kind of occurring to me. That's a really, really good point, right? If the entire fleet has to be electric by 2035, how much sense moving forward as we get closer to that date does it make to continue to buy, I guess they're all diesel or gas powered.
Right.
That's very smart.
So if you consider this vehicle here, typically your your bus will last about 10 years. You might get 11 or 12 out of it, depending on its maintenance, if there's not a lot of snow. Because it's really the undercarriage that takes the wear and tear. So this vehicle, if we're purchasing it in 2024, that's probably that again will be, that vehicle will run its time with us, but whenever that vehicle comes to be replaced, it'll be with an electric vehicle.
I suppose that means then if your district, like I believe Garrison, mostly uses a service for transportation
Yes.
of one kind or another, that those services are going to be simultaneously making that migration.
That's a good question. I actually, I'm not sure about that. That might be a workaround, if you will. I don't know if the law is written in such a way that requires entities that are servicing schools with transportation to convert their fleets. So if schools are contracting for transportation, I think the law, and I don't want to misspeak on this, but I believe the law was initially written, if the buses you purchase as a public school have to be electric at those dates, but those districts who are contracting for that service, they're not purchasing those vehicles. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But
Investment opportunity, friends.
perhaps.
And if we get a different governor in a few years, that could change, right?
I don't
Or
know.
is that in?
Well, I think it'd be difficult to at that point. And sometimes you bring up a good point, Maggie. There are pieces of law and legislation that I would have hoped would have changed when new administrations came in, but we're still operating by them. So I really don't know if that would be the case. And I will say that many districts are now beginning to incorporate this into their planning. You have to. So as we begin to make the investment in, let's just say, the infrastructure that's needed, we put that on the fore, at the fore for a proposition, as part of a proposition we do, because we want to be prepared to make this transition. Well, then does our thinking shift now because we're making initial investments to go ahead and convert to electric when the time comes, even if the law changes, because now we have the infrastructure in place. Maybe we organized a whole schedule around it. Perhaps the costs have come down by that point, which I think they will. I think that'll be part of our discussions if there were to be any changes.
The push for the electrification came from the legislative, right?
Yes.
It wasn't like by executive fiat. So,
Thank you.
that
Yes,
legislation is not really going to shift unless there's a push in the assembly to do
Never
that.
know.
Well, the assembly
We're in New York.
is a little different.
You never know.
You never know what might
That's a
happen.
good point,
kidding.
Ezra. Thank you
Yeah.
for that, though. That's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Just to wrap up, this is a chart we've included for the past few years to give folks an idea of what the actual dollar impact will be, depending on what your home market value is. So I'll just go right to if you have a home market value of $500,000, a tax levy increase of 1.96%, that will equate to an increase of $138 on your tax bill from what you're currently paying. So a little more than $10 a month. And then we obviously put this on somewhat of a scale to give folks a better sense in dollars what the cost would be to them and their taxes if this budget were to be approved by the community.
And that's for all of Phillipstown, right?
Yes.
There's no different equalization ratios. in this
I don't believe the
community, right?
small portion of Fishkill. So it's for Phillipstown, yes.
It's for
But remember,
Phillipstown,
we
right.
have a small portion of Fishkill there
Right.
as well. There, it could vary. Okay. I'll just make note now. I think Shauna may be on later that we are beginning the point where we meet with our partners and other community groups to discuss the budget. It's a little bit, it's the presentation is more similar to the administrator's recommendation where we have a higher level of detail. And we'll be meeting with our school partners tomorrow morning. And I think Sean and Peggy both plan to attend that. So thank you. We'll be meeting with them via Zoom at 9 and just sharing a little bit more about what we shared here, looking for their, obviously, support, but most importantly, answer any questions that they have and to hear feedback that they may have that Sean and Peggy can bring back to the board. And that's just the first meeting that we have lined up, and we'll have some others as we go between now and the actual budget vote.
I just have a quick question on the revenue summary. If we could go back to the other revenue, which is primarily the tuition, what we get in. And I mean, a lot of these numbers are not final. We don't know what they are. But are we in a better position this year than we were, previous years at this time in terms of having a better grasp on what the other revenue is going to be in terms of knowing how many students coming in?
Yeah, so Garrison's been very helpful in that regard, in that sometimes even at this point, we're still working off of a projection. And while students can always change their mind, Garrison was helpful in pushing up their date where students had to indicate what school they were going to or planning to attend for the upcoming school year. So that was helpful to us. So we're very clear on how many students that we expect to receive from Garrison for next school year, which was right now is at 13. We have a couple of other students from outside of both communities that tuition in, as the board's familiar with. So generally we feel this is a clear figure, whereas in past years I would say it was just coming to clarity right around now. So it's helpful. We're definitely having that information. I think it equates to probably 2 months ahead of time than when we've had it in the past. And you can see in actual dollars what the difference is. So in terms of when you say, are we in a better position? In terms of certainty around the number, yes. In terms of actual dollar figures, it's roughly the same. The $50,000 difference is, it's significant. Any dollar is, but it's not gonna. It significantly influence budget development through the spring.
Great. Any questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Benante. Thank you, Catherine, for coming this evening. In case we had any questions, I appreciate all the work that you've both done. Moving on to communication from the public. Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on any special presentations or active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in, state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel are strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, we are listening. Please leave your contact information with our district clerk, Megan Shields, for prompt follow-up from the board president or superintendent. Don't believe we have anyone here. Moving on to information reports. Nothing here, unless there's any discussion about it. And moving on to consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right. These are our committee minutes. Minutes from the Technology Committee on March 23rd. I noted the inclusion of a chat GPT conversation. To ban or not to ban, I'm sure this is a topic that we will be reviewing as we move forward. I look forward to hearing that included in some reports, I'm sure, from our building principals moving forward. But it's good to know that it hasn't upended everything yet. Yet. Great. Work with your robot overlords. Right. That's what I have to say. Moving on to consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right. Any discussion? No? Dr. Benante?
Nope.
No? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? All right. Moving on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Anything you'd like to talk
If I
about?
may, it's, I wouldn't say rare, it's just not as common that we say goodbye to staff members before the end of the year, but we do have a few staff members who are moving on from us for a variety of reasons. So I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Gesson, Ms. Hilka, and Ms. Rivera, who will be ending their time with us at the end of this month or on or about that time, and thank them for their service to our school district.
Thank you so much, Dr. Benante. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, moving on to new business, CSE, CPSE recommendations. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. All right, moving on to the special education plan. This plan is being updated by our Director of PPS, Dr. Kashian. She's going to discuss that at the April 18th meeting, correct?
Yes, at our next week's meeting. So a markup is there for your review, and also the draft for
Great.
the upcoming. And Regina will speak to this at our next meeting.
Great. Thank you so much. Moving on to the Community Budget Forum date and participation from the board. I assume that's what...
Summer Board Retreat.
Oh, the summer board retreat. Thank you so much. Let's discuss those dates. I was in denial because all of our board members were like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing next week. How am I going to know what I'm doing then? So let's discuss our summer board retreat dates. I think that typically we try to do one fairly approximate to the end of this school year, but it often gets pushed into August and sometimes folds into the beginning of the school year. That's happened before. So I don't know even how to begin this conversation except to say Peggy is notoriously a traveler, which is a great thing, but I don't know if...
Work.
Yeah, for work and
I don't
pleasure.
want anybody to get the wrong idea.
That's right. I don't mean to... That seems like slander before an election to say that she's traveling everywhere. But
We are,
no.
we are traveling the back end of July and the beginning of August.
Back end of July and the beginning of
Yeah.
August. Is that when you're traveling? Is that what you said? Okay, great.
One of those weeks.
So what, back end of
Like
July, so that's like July 30th?
16th, probably. Those 2 weeks, probably 16th and 29th. They haven't locked down everything. Probably maybe here for part of the 31st week and then gone for the week of the 6th through 12th.
The 6th through 12th. Okay.
So really almost all of mid-July
sort
to
of that-
mid-August.
Yeah.
Mid-July to mid-August. Okay. And we don't want to do this too close to our reorg meeting, so we may be moving to the end of...
Would
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to have a reorg meeting on the very beginning of July, right? Should we knock that one out, and then do we do something the second week in July, or do we want to move
Sure.
later than that?
No, I can't. I will almost certainly be gone the
Okay.
week of July 10th.
Okay, All right.
Great. So we're slowly making progress. I could send out a doodle right now at the meeting if I need to. Is there any time in that second week of July, or, those approximate to no? So are we looking closer and closer to the end of August then?
Yes. I
Okay,
think.
great.
I'm gone the last 2 weeks of August.
You're gone the last 2 weeks in August.
The
That's right,
20th.
'cause doesn't matter. There's only 1 week where this works, so.
The
do that.
13th?
No, I'm out August 13th. I'm gone.
You said there's only 1 week. Would you like
There
to
will
put-
only be 1 week. Where we'll figure it out, but it'll
Oh,
be
I see what
like,
you're saying.
oh, we've
Yes.
got 3 days where we're all here. Yeah.
So wait, you're gone the week of August?
The
4th?
August 12th to August 19th. Yeah, the week of the.
12th, August 19th.
And then you're gone starting,
Probably like the 17th or 18th,
Yeah.
and then we would be back. What is that? That would be, let's see, we haven't
The Labor
booked
Day.
it yet, but that would be.
okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, I am guessing, I haven't made solid work commitments for travel. I anticipated that I would have to travel on July 10th, but it really does seem like July 10th is the only possible week. And so give me one more second. If we could do it toward the beginning of that week.
Beginning.
Like the Monday, the 10th, or
So
Tuesday, the 11th.
Monday,
Monday's great for me. It tends to be on Monday or Tuesday or Friday. If we do mornings, we're in good shape.
I could also probably do Friday of that week.
Friday the 14th.
I could do Friday. I actually could probably. Now I'm actually
Bastille
that.
Day?
Oh, actually, you know what? That might get moved. Actually, I think we should just find a time that week that works for everybody, and I'll
Great.
get
Okay.
somebody else to
So
to
we'll
do
look
this.
look at the week of the 9th through the 15th.
Yes.
The 10th through the 14th.
10th through
10th
14th.
through the
Mhm.
14th.
Okay.
Zeroing in. That's
All right.
amazing.
Love it.
It's the. I mean,
It is early.
Ezra's right. It's the only week.
Sarah, gotta get prepared. What are we gonna talk about? Lovely. Okay, great. That's a good start. I guess the.
So we're gonna go from there. So now,
Okay.
okay,
Uh-huh.
that was relatively painless, honestly.
And if we need a business meeting in August, we
That-
can do one without a full, we
don't
need,
need
we can do
full.
just quorum. Okay.
And usually we reserve those for hires
Yeah.
that we're not able to make at the reorg
Right,
or
right.
by the reorg. I am encouraged to think that we will have the majority of our hires instructional for the reorg or before, and could even have them in the weeks ahead.
Yeah.
But it's helpful to have that August meeting for any
Great.
last minute hires that would
Yeah.
be before the start of the school year.
So I'm looking at July, you say the 14th, the 15th.
Croissants and baguettes would be necessary.
Are you
on the
looking
14th.
for
We have to.
August meeting date or?
No,
Okay.
we have the span of
that
week. Are we good there? We good to stay there? Okay, good. All right. Sounds lovely.
Jamon?
August seems,
It's busy.
Everybody.
yeah.
Come on.
It's
We'll
gonna
do that.
sneak up on you.
You would, if we were in Europe, nothing would happen in August. Everybody knows that, right? It is
Last time I
proper
checked, we were not in Europe.
that- Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. Embrace the.
I do. I believe
embrace
me, I
that
do.
European model.
I would happily embrace. Okay. Perhaps then we might be pushing towards the beginning of the school year then for the second week in August. Right?
For
A
which-
weekend
What are we on?
August is out
entirely, right? So September the
Wait,
first week.
For what?
for another meeting.
Yes.
I think
Retreat
we
or?
usually do
Follow
our
up.
second retreat. Don't we use it, we
Mhm.
do it in the fall?
We've done it in September.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then that's a good place to start. Thank you. All right. Now,
Just before moving on,
Mhm.
do we want to talk reorg meeting?
I was actually wondering the same thing.
sure.
Just
Let's do it.
because that first Tuesday is the 4th of July.
Yeah, it is.
That second week is when we're looking to do the retreat. So if we're going to do it, it needs to be after July 1st, right?
Does, there's some
They have to-
parameters for when your reorg can be, and it's helpful to have them in front of us.
Okay, all right, so why don't,
I'm kind of looking to Catherine, in case you happen to remember
Okay.
off the top of your head what those parameters were.
Does it still have to be by the 5th, or did they change
I
that?
think if you're,
Especially if it falls on a holiday, they'll give you a day. It's it's probably announced already, but I don't have it.
Well, so we can talk about it
How about we
just
send
next
that to the
week.
All right, we'll do it next week.
Thank you.
Yes,
We can do it next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on now to Community Budget Forum date and participation.
Just waiting for Megan to finish her note.
Megan.
Remind me of the date, Megan, when you have a
Well,
moment.
we didn't pick a date, so
Ah.
that's what this time was going to be
Correct.
for, to talk about which board members would like to be part of it, and then select a date.
So our thought is for the community budget forum to do it before a board meeting. That may be a good opportunity, one, to have a board member or board members present, since you may already be planning to be here, even though we know it's a very busy time of the year with activities and whatnot outside of school. And if so, would there be a particular Tuesday?
If that's
That
the
works
case,
better.
then the second might be the right time to do that.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's the right.
That's
Yeah,
conceivably
the only one.
the only functioning day.
That makes sense. I can be there
We
for
do
that.
that around 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And
And do we want to do that in person or through
so I'm
Zoom?
curious of the board's feedback on that. In the past, we've been leaning more on virtual opportunities. We've done these also in the cafeteria or some other space here, but it seems like we still don't get great participation.
Right.
But the participation that we do get, it still seems to be more of a leaning towards a virtual meeting as opposed to a in-person meeting.
Right.
Barrier is
Yeah.
pretty low to log on and hear a little bit about the budget and participate as much or as little as one chooses. So,
But if you do it right before a board meeting, you just need to be cognizant of the fact that people here would actually need to be sitting in different places for Zoom to really work, which is fine.
Yeah, that's true.
I actually will be out of town in a second, but I mean, I could always join via Zoom.
you're able to attend.
I'm able
Hold on a second.
to attend whether we do it in person or via Zoom. I tend to agree that Zoom would be
Yep.
optimal.
Just
but-
I think so.
enable more people to join.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing.
Go back to our webinar days.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll rehearse.
And do it from like 6 to 6:45 and then break and then have everybody come together. I think that makes sense.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the approval of the memorandum of understanding with Dutchess Community College for college credit courses. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the memorandum of understanding with Dutchess Community College for college credit courses for the 2023-2024 school year, and authorizes the superintendent to sign the agreement on behalf of the district.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
If I can just
Please
provide
do.
a little background, this has been a topic for quite some time with DCC. It's come up in the far past. It's come up again recently regarding the cost structure for our students and any student who's in DCC's catchment area and schools that offer concurrent enrollment. Currently, students are not charged anything for taking a course. They can get college credit. And they can apply that if they were to go on to Dutchess. They can apply that credit towards their program. However, Dutchess continues to cite that it is not legal for them to continue to engage in the arrangement in this way, even though they've been doing it for some time. The arrangement is set up to charge students 1/3 of the cost per credit, which equates to, I think, somewhere around $80. And they have gone through a review process themselves. And with their trustees, they have met with me and other area superintendents to talk about this shift. They've heard our feedback on it. That being said, they've made clear that they're moving forward with the updated structure for next school year, for the fall. They were willing to delay the implementation of this. This was initially, when we first started talking about it, scheduled to occur this spring. They have set that back to the fall. But at this point, I think we've provided all of the feedback we can provide. Dutchess has heard that. We still want to offer concurrent enrollment for our students. We think that's a good opportunity. It's still at a significantly reduced cost, and this arrangement outlines the parameters for that.
Is there just real quick, just an opportunity for financial aid for families
No.
that wouldn't even be able to apply? Okay.
No. And that was a significant sticking point for us, that if they're students now and they're paying tuition with Dutchess, they should be eligible for financial aid. However, they're not full-time students. Thus, Dutchess has cited that they're ineligible for aid through the college. They've encouraged us, though, that they are willing, and I feel they've demonstrated this through their actions, a willingness to work with school foundations collectively, or other community foundations. You have the Community Foundation of Dutchess County as an example of other community-based foundations, to establish a pool for students to perhaps apply into or to review for those who are in need, which I think there's good faith behind that.
If you have the Excelsior Scholarship, which exists for students going to college and for any state school, right? That's covered.
Yeah,
You know?
so thus
And then we're
part of
talking
their
tuition.
revenue issue is that they have more students who are coming on an Excelsior scholarship,
Right.
which they're, I want to say, losing revenue, but that's why they cannot. That's one of the reasons they would cite they cannot continue with these arrangements that they have with area high schools,
Right.
which there are thousands of students who engage in this.
Are you suggesting it's another unfunded mandate?
Still, a third of the cost is a pretty good opportunity for our kids, and I trust that within our community we can find and make arrangements if it presents as a financial burden for a student, in particular a student who's looking to pursue actually attending Dutchess and transferring the credit in, that we'd find a way to help them out.
I guess I actually wasn't that aware of what you're calling it concurrent enrollment. I usually think about this as dual enrollment classes. I mean, that's kind of how it's talked about, at least in my world. So this has been an agreement for a while. Do we know the numbers of students who typically?
Participate?
Yeah.
We do. I don't have that information
Okay.
for you this evening.
Yeah, and I should have thought to ask about it earlier. I mean, I think it's really, like, if it's something that either the Haldane School Foundation or some other foundation would consider. I mean, I really do, like, I think how high school happens is gonna change. I mean, I do think, I mean, you're seeing it happen more and more, and maybe not in a community like Cold Spring, but, like, I think high schools are becoming more aware of the different needs of students, the different plans that students have after high school, the resistance of folks of the idea of spending 4 years, and so I think any opportunities that we can find to provide students with these kind of dual enrollment opportunities really makes sense. I think in the past, honestly, I've been a little bit more dubious about them, but I mean, actually really, the more I watch about how much high school is needing to change to meet the needs of students who are beginning to question 4 years of traditional high school and multiple years of traditional college, I think we need to consider some of these alternatives. And as long as we have the processes in place, which I anticipate that we do, to really make sure that students aren't prevented from public school opportunities, which essentially it is, because it's offered through the public school, because of costs, and I feel pretty good about it.
One thing I'll do, Julia provides her high school detail report next
Oh, that
week.
would be great. If she
And
could add
I already
that.
know she's looked up how many students are involved in this program and have been over the past few years, because she looked that up for me. So I'll just ask her to include that as part of her presentation.
Being an educator that has done that, I teach in these programs.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, you teach some
I
of these dual enrollment.
I taught for Orange County Community College,
cool.
and I currently teach for Syracuse.
Okay.
There are pros and cons,
Oh, there
right?
are.
There's benefits, right? And there are districts that run it really well, and there are districts that, there's benefits to paying for everybody sometimes, and then there's not benefits for just covering the cost for everybody to take them. It's a mixed bag, right? It really depends upon how the school really structures it and how the community uses that service well. So I think that's, me personally, I find a lot of benefit in college courses for high school students, and that exposure. But it's can have its certain drawbacks, so you just have to go into it understanding that.
Great. All right. Moving on to. Oh wait, no. I think we all those in favor. I was swept up in this discourse. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Great. Now moving on to our second communication from the public, and since we have no one here, I'm going to forego this paragraph and move on to board reflections. Anyone?
I have two.
Great, let's hear.
It is National Library Month, and so I think I just wanted to commend all the school library staff that we have here at Haldane, and commend school librarians across the board. Our school libraries are really important resources, and I support them. And then also, this is not really something for us to come to a decision about, but I was looking at the Haldane Horizons recently, and I find that's such a great resource. And it's an attempt, like I think actually when Megan with Dr. Bowers brought you on to start doing it, like it was really part of our attempt to really communicate to the public about all the really great things that are happening at Haldane, and it's always been such a really great resource. For reasons that make sense, right now it's distributed via email, and it's distributed to people who are on, I think primarily parents, staff, Board of Education members. And I don't know what the solution is, but I would love for it to be available, at least from time to time, more broadly to members of the public. Now, I don't think we want to pay to ship it to people, right?
Potentially, we could get a member of the public and also a member of the journalistic group to opine about the opportunity to potentially insert within one or both of our local papers upon occasion.
Yeah.
But I won't throw that out there.
It would be printing it. I didn't know. I want to throw it out there. I want people to think about
it's a great
it.
idea.
But I was like, what about if we even bought a little ad in the PCNR that had a short URL for how people could access it? What if, we could publish for a few times in the paper saying, do you want to hear about what's happening at Haldane? Sign up for our mailing list, or there could be, I don't know, we're about to ask the public to, vote on the budget, and I want to think about, it's something we've, thinking about for a long time, but how to share with the public more broadly some of the really great things that are happening. And I do think that Haldane Horizons really does highlight that, because you see academic stuff, you see art stuff, you see athletic stuff in it. Yeah, so I think it's great.
It's a great suggestion.
You jogged my memory that this last week there was a day that was the paraprofessionals sort of acknowledgement day and appreciation day. I think it was on Tuesday, and I think it's always important to single out what sometimes are unsung heroes here on campus. I know that my family's had tremendously powerful relationships with our paraprofessionals, who tend to be parents that sort of live here in the district, and they've been some of the more meaningful relationships that we've had and that Declan has had. So I have lots of gratitude to them and for them. Great. All right. Like a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Oh, did we?
I have no plans.
Oh, no plans. Okay.
Sean read my mind.
That's what I thought. I did.
Spoken enough.
Well, I saw you looking at the clock, so I was like, all right. Okay.
Sorry.
Any discussion? No. All right. All those in
Well, do
favor?
we have a so moved
Aye.
in a second? Did we get that?
I heard them.
All right,
Yeah,
fantastic.
thank you.
I'm an aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? No. Great. Thank you.